Okay, welcome to 1000 Ways to be a Champion for Children. My name is Alan Friesen. Glad to have you join us. We have a very special guest with us tonight. You can see on my little description, it says I'm a champion for children. We got a champion for children Rotarian, and you got Crystal Morris, one caring adult. Crystal, welcome to 1000 Ways.
Thank you for having me, Alan.
I'm really, you know what, you and I chatted it must be 2 months ago, and then we never kind of made this connection till now. But I did kind of want to give you a little overview of what I think we're trying to do here, and I would welcome your gentle correction if you got a better way to make this happen, okay?
All right, let's go.
Yeah, so basically what we think is the most important things to focus on is increasing awareness about adverse childhood experiences so people know about them. 2, encourage adult survivors of childhood trauma to readdress that trauma, to come to terms with it, to work through it, to whatever the requirement is with a professional, but to address that. Because the thought process is that a lot of times little people who get victimized believe somehow that they're responsible, they're at fault, they have the shame and the blame. And of course that doesn't make any sense, right? It's not true in any way. And then further, I like to explain about the dissociative response, which I learned in this journey, and how increasing awareness of that, I think, is very valuable for maybe more adult people who have been assaulted, abused, that they know that there was a biological reason why they didn't call out or scream out or fight, because their body was trying to protect them. So basically, that's kind of the way that we're increase awareness, encourage adult survivors to seek treatment, and do whatever we can to protect kiddos today from becoming victimized, and also share whatever resilience building skills that would be applicable to anybody, because these are things that yeah. So tell us, one caring adult, tell us about, first of all, any correction, any ideas as to how we can do this better, and we're doing it?
No, so I love the overview. I think you're spot on. A lot of people are coming to the awareness of adverse childhood experiences called ACEs, but not as many are aware of positive childhood experiences. And that's a study that was done in 2019 or published in 2019 from Johns Hopkins University. And it identifies 7 specific things that are needed for children, for families to build resiliency. And that's how you counter adverse childhood experiences, is by increasing the instances and occurrences of positive childhood experiences. And one of the things that study highlighted as a positive childhood experience is having supportive, caring adults, which is one of the reasons why I called my business One Caring Adult. Because studies show connection and having a sense of belonging, having your identity and your personhood valued, that is what creates this protective factor that promotes resiliency in our children and our youth.
So, one caring adult, how could one caring adult make any difference? Not somebody who's qualified and trained and has decades of experience with this. I didn't insult you with decades, right? That's about right, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, but we don't own it all the time. But so there is power in connection. There is power in relationship. And oftentimes we discount that as not being enough, and thinking that you need someone with letters and credentials in order to achieve transformation. And you don't. Everyone has the opportunity to rebuild the neural pathways in a child's brain that has been destroyed as a result of trauma. Just introducing that child to new experiences, allowing them the ability to dream, because some children don't have that. All they know is what they've seen and experienced, and to even begin to fathom a world outside of their 200 square feet area is unrealistic. So that is the power of having meaningful relationships, not just any old relationship, right? We want it to be quality. We want it to be meaningful. I love saying there are 4 parts to a meaningful relationship. You go in curious, not furious. which is hard for adults to do because it's our way or the highway. Children should be seen and not heard. So slowing down and going in curious and not furious for some can be extremely hard. I don't want to hear you assuming that you know. I want you to ask. So it goes in line with that curiosity. Also, looking and going in with the intention to restore and not destroy. We confuse and interchange discipline and punishment, and they're not interchangeable. Discipline is creating a sense of value, of rules, and of ordinances to keep us functioning together and coexisting in a healthy way. So discipline promotes the desire to maintain that. Punishment doesn't. Punishment destroys. But last but not least, it's not rushing to correction, but rushing to connect. What is that person going through? What is happening or what has happened, instead of just focusing on what was wrong and wanting to correct or dominate that individual. So those are pieces to that caring adult relationship that is enough to turn that person's life around. Anyone who's experienced trauma and come out on the other side to be someone successful, there has been that at least one caring adult. For me, it was a third grade teacher that annoyed the heck out of me. Oh my gosh, this lady was horrible to my third grade mind, but to my older than third grade mind, she's a blessing to me. And I've had 6 ACEs, but more than 6 experiences with trauma, because ACEs are, it's not the end all be all of trauma. But if it wasn't for my third grade teacher that stayed on my case until I graduated high school, I don't know where I would be. That's the power of one caring adult.
Wow. So one person, you're a teacher in your past, and then obviously stayed with you for the next 9 years to encourage you to get your education. Wow. That is certainly a caring person, right? And I mean, she had a role to be a teacher. She didn't have a role to go out of her way to help Crystal, right? So.
No, but when you see value, you do it. I talk about this lady, and you might know her. Her first name is Marguerite, and she was silent for years and years and years after being raped by her mother's boyfriend. And after talking and telling his name, her uncles went, after he was released from jail, went and killed him. And she blamed her voice. She said her voice is so powerful, men are killed as a result of her voice. So she stopped talking, and that child stopped talking for years until a teacher said, you love poetry, but you'll never get the beauty of the words unless you speak them and you hear yourself saying them. Now we know her as Maya Angelou. But if it wasn't for that teacher, we would have missed this amazing, phenomenal woman. In her words, we would have missed out on that treasure. But that's what one caring adult can do. It's transformational if you decide to step out of your space and your comfort to go and invest in the life of someone who by no means of their own actions are in a situation and doing the best with what they have.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, that's a beautiful story about Maya Angelou. That's wow. I never heard that before. Hey, before we went live here, we're so busy chatting, I just missed it there. Sorry about that. But before we went live here, we were talking about that part of the whole ACEs thing. ACEs, the science related to ACEs, it's also compounded by income inequality, by racial discrimination, by fear of different religions, and fear of different people who are different in any respect, right? And that's the people who are different are the ones that are more likely to become victimized, right? And then the cycle of somebody getting victimized becomes that person is more likely to become a perpetrator or be re-victimized. And then that cycle continues. You're on a mission to break the cycle from school to prison, right? This is a real thing, right, Crystal?
It is a real thing. We have a school to prison pipeline that disproportionately affects young Black boys of color, as well as students who are designated special needs. So now for me, this is a personal mission, because I have not one, but 2 boys on the autism spectrum. and both of them are Black boys. So that puts them at an increased likelihood of seeing some of this. So I have to advocate for my boys, and my boys aren't just the two that are upstairs sleeping right now, but all boys, and by extension, all girls, and everyone else who's disproportionately affected. I tend to refer to it not as the school to prison pipeline, but the womb to tomb pipeline, because I see how it starts before we get into schools. So, in our country, in America, we have this little thing going on with, some racial injustice. And as a result, there are tons of protests popping up. And I took my daughter last year to a peaceful protest that was happening in our community. And she noticed a boy holding up a placard, a sign, and on it says, "At what age do I stop being cute?" Mm-hmm. Registered for her, and she was 9 at the time. And the fact that it registered for her so much was, one, painful, but two, I had this moment of that's my girl. I'm kind of proud of this. But we had to have the conversation because she has a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old brother. So for her, it caused her to wonder, are they still cute or are they now a threat? And having to have these conversations. But I can go younger because I see the disproportionate outcomes in maternal health care for Black women in this country. When I had my last, I had already finished my master's degree. I was serving as a therapist within my community. And after I delivered him, I had a ridiculously painful headache the next day, and I couldn't get rid of it. And when I spoke to my attending, the physician on the floor, he said, "Just get some chocolate cake and Coke for breakfast. You've earned it. The caffeine will take your headache away." So I'm thinking, well, shoot, I'm in this really nice hospital. I'm paying for it. I might as well eat the chocolate cake and the Coke. And I got chocolate cake and Coke for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because my headache wouldn't subside. And not a nurse, she was a nurse's assistant. She came in and she said, "Hey, ask for the anesthesiologist." And I'm thinking, why would I ask for the anesthesiologist for a headache? But she ran out the room saying, "Do it." And the next day I asked for the anesthesiologist, and sure enough, my epidural, there was a hole left in my spine causing fluid to rush to my brain, which would have been a bad outcome had I gone home with this. But no one bothered to check. Oh. No one asked questions. No one investigated, because there is a myth that Black people can tolerate a vast degree of pain, which is why we see that narcotics aren't handed out to us the way they're handed out to other populations. All of this causes that complex trauma to happen. Mm-hmm. So it puts people in a space where they're hypervigilant. Sure. So they raise children who are hypervigilant. So a simple, "Hey, can you take out your notebook so I can see the work that you're doing?" gets met with a "What are you doing? Leave me alone" type of response, because everything for that child is now perceived as a threat. So for me to be trauma informed is to be racial justice informed. You can't see one without the other. You can't see it out of context. And to the point you mentioned earlier, not just on a racial standpoint, but for every group. Because for a child who's going through a transition of trying to have his or her identity validated, but always being met with the wrong pronoun, hypervigilance comes in because they're constantly fighting for their right to survive and to exist in the way they see. This is me, accept me, validate me, and that causes all of the issues. We see, I have on a shirt that a girlfriend of mine made, "There will be drama." We see the drama, but we miss out on the subtle nuances that led to that situation becoming so hysterical, so excessive, because we're not going in curious, we're going in furious.
Yeah, I love that. Not going in curious. We are going in furious instead of the correct way to go in curious. Yeah, I love that. And it speaks also to the differences. Like, why? Have you ever heard of Daryl Davis? Do you know who this guy is?
No.
All right. This is amazing. This Daryl Davis guy, Black man, about my age, a blues man, Double D blues band, I think is what his blues band is. but his father was with the U.S. government in some kind of ambassadorial capacity and would travel all over the world. So Daryl grew up in this environment. He had pictures of him in Egypt and Iran and Iraq and Australia and all over the place, right? And all of his kids that he would be in school with were all like different colors, different religions, different, like they're all just different. They got along just fine. When he was, I think it was about 8 years old, his dad got a posting in America. So they go to America, great, and so his experience is, hey, it doesn't matter what people look like, makes no difference, right? Or what they sound like or their religions. So he joins the Boy Scouts, and they have a parade down the little town that they're the Boy Scouts, and he's in the parade, and like he's getting hit with rocks and bottles and cans and such, and he's like, why are they throwing rocks and cans at the Boy Scouts? Like, why do they hate the Boy Scouts, right? And then the leaders obviously figure this out, right? So they go and they stand on either side of them to protect them from getting hit, and then he has to explain that, well, this is racism. It's not the Boy Scouts, it's you. And he's like, how can they hate me if they never met me? How is that possible? So he goes on this mission to go and have conversations with leaders of Ku Klux Klans. And he meets with them. And for many of these guys, this is the first time they've ever met a black person, right? And it's just like, this is a whole revelation. Hey, they're pretty like us. Like, there's not a whole bunch of difference here, right? So anyways, and I think he had like 20,
You're talking now. Yeah.
So, but that's about being curious. Like, in his case, he was curious about how can you hate me if you never met me, which is a really good question, right? Like that is the question, right? So
it happens the same way every other stereotype or phobia that we have is established. This is all you've experienced. This is all you're exposed to. In my trainings on racial justice, I show a page from a textbook that was still in circulation in the 70s here. And on it, it has a very well-dressed Black man, a very well-dressed white Black woman and their children. And they're walking with luggage and they're boarding a ship. And that was describing Jamestown 1619, where slaves were brought into this country. But the way it was framed in that textbook was they were boarding the Love Boat. They were going on a vacation. This is something that they willingly chose to do. And it wasn't slavery. They were employed. They were taken care of. And one of the lines said that they would, servants would be fed frequently with barbecue, and they would be heard laughing and singing in celebration, and the work was never hard, but it built their stamina and their endurance. This is how it was sold to generations of people. So there is, so validation is not endorsement. I can validate your ignorance if this is all you've ever known. I can't hate you for being ignorant, but once you know better, the responsibility is now on you to do better. So I could have definitely appreciate his tactic, because so many people just don't know.
Yeah.
And you only know what you know. You don't know it if no one's ever taught it to you. I can stand and argue that there are way more opportunities for you to learn if you choose to. So your willful ignorance is an issue in of itself, but I find the need to have these conversations and normalize them, because the more we normalize them is the more you'll start realizing people having those experiences of, we're more alike than I thought.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Cool. Anyways, yeah, it was a fascinating story. And again, as you said about being curious, how important is that, right? Somebody's different than you. Have a conversation with them. You'd be surprised what you learn. Like, I think I have a lesson to learn from every human being on the planet. Some, I got a bunch, but everybody, I know I got something to learn from every person that I ever encounter, right? I believe that to be true. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So with One Caring Adult, this is actually your company where you deliver services, correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
I do direct services with children and families anymore. I grew tired, to say the least, of feeling like it just wasn't enough. So now I work with the youth serving organization. So I work with school systems. I have a contract with the maternal systems of care here. So with all of our newborn to 5-year-olds. I work with after school programs. Everyone and anyone who has any influence over a child, I work with them so that they can transform how they're delivering their service. Because if I only work with 20 families, I only impact those 20 kids, maybe a few more in the community. But if I work with a teacher who is seeing 180 kids, transformative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you are able to influence people, even with your story of you being in grade 3 and you having a teacher that makes a difference in your life for the whole rest of your life, that's a pretty powerful story, right?
Definitely.
Every teacher could aspire to say, man, I can do something, and that difference will be sustainable for decades to come. This is a way I leave a legacy, right? This is a way that I can make a difference beyond my life even. So.
Exactly. And it's not even just with teachers. My hope is to be able to go into a bank and deliver this training. Because if you can understand the impact of trauma and how it affects your customers, then you'll see, okay, if we can make some investments, then we can stop this foreclosure notice, because mom isn't taking 6 trips to the school because the child is having a bad day. If we can stop that, then she is able to stay working, so she's able to make that loan payment, which makes your bank,
Yeah.
It brings that community sense to your bank. So the goal is to definitely get this sense of awareness throughout the community. So I'm not just building resilient families. My goal is to build a resilient community.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and that's what the solutions that you are working with and the agencies that you're working with, what you're doing is replicable anywhere. Wouldn't you agree? Like besides getting the language parts figured out, the rest of the messaging, the rest of the supports that you are recommending, that you are encouraging, are pretty straightforward type things, right? When you talk about one caring adult, Dr. Bruce Perry talks about the relationship deficit, right, that kids have, and that way the adverse childhood experiences become that much more harmful than if they have the ameliorating effect of having a caring adult in their life, one or more, right? So yeah.
Definitely. I'm getting ready to do a workshop for a domestic violence shelter in our community. And I was looking up the statistics, and it was showing that women who have been victims of domestic violence with ACE scores of 4 or more, they're 500% more likely to have domestic violence relationships than a woman with 0 ACEs. So that lets me know that someone with these early experiences, the body keeps the score, right? We know this. You could be exposed to trauma at 3 and it shapes your trajectory for the rest of your life. But if we can mitigate those traumas and then transform them into resilience, now we start seeing these social problems that we're experiencing decrease. But there are not enough therapists to do this work. There are not enough teachers to do this work, but there are enough of us just everyday citizens in the community. And if we are armed with this understanding of the importance of having meaningful relationships with our coworkers and with our children and with our children's friends, then in one generation, we can make huge gains. We can completely flip the script. But we need the buy-in from an entire community. It's not good enough anymore to say, oh, sit and wait on your therapist to come, because we know that accessibility is an issue. Not everyone who needs therapy has the means of getting it, but everyone interacts with at least one person on a regular basis. That is one caring adult.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Like the professionals, it's hard work. One, like doing the work that the professionals do, seeing the things they have to see, hearing the stories they have to hear, that's very, very hard work to do. But the caring part in terms of just being somebody who's available to listen to a little person who wants to tell them something, to give them a hug, a kiss on the forehead, a pat on the back, and say, hey, go Sally, go Timmy, you know, you got this, you're good. You know, it just, even those kind of little bit of words of encouragement make a huge difference in a kid's life, right?
Yep. It causes us, though, to have to check our stress because the more stressed we are as individuals, the less empathy we have.
Definitely.
And when our empathy goes down, our biases go through the roof. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see this disproportionate outcome when it comes to policing, where some are targeted while others are giving warnings and encouragements to have a nice day. It's because empathy goes away, biases skyrocket, and then we have conflicts just going through the roof. So if we have this true sense of community where we're sharing and having this collectivist kind of a mentality where your well-being is directly tied to my well-being, we take the stress level down a notch and we're able to build these really quality relationships that is to the benefit of the whole group. The zero-sum mentality has to go away, where people feel like I have to give away something in order for you to have equal access. If we're really going to talk about it, you're giving away something that you probably got because of no other thing but privilege. And it's uncomfortable for some to hear, but you know, we can go back to the history books to prove this. So how can we get to a place where we all coexist in a way where everyone benefits? Because if everyone benefits, we all win. This shouldn't be a competition, because I want to see you win as much as I want to win.
You bet. Exactly. Exactly. A little bit from me, a little bit from you. Together we can set each other free.
Yep.
Maybe Staples. So kind of on your comments about where slavery, and in the textbook it was, oh, look at this nice black family is all dressed up to go to church on Sunday, and they're boarding the Queen Mary or whatever it looked like, kind of a thing. Yeah, not the reality. But I think we, and probably you with your First Nations people in the United States, what state are you in? Krista, I never asked.
Oh, I'm in Florida.
Florida. Okay, Florida. What I'm pretty certain is that the people who were talking about what they were doing with the First Nations people in Canada and the United States were saying, oh, well, we're helping. They're savages. We're helping them become people. We're going to teach them, proper manners, and we're going to teach them about God, and their life is going to be way better. It's probably what in their head, the story they were telling them, as they take kids out of their homes and beat the culture out of them and just abuse them horribly for 6 generations, right? And when I, as just a Canadian, heard this, it's just like, no, that didn't happen. And then I dig into it more and say, oh my goodness. And the last residential school, which is where they pulled the kids out of their homes and put them into a school, and they broke their ties with their family, broke their ties with their culture, broke any potential for them to know how to parent, right? Because how would they? Because they've lost that whole thing. That, those things that occurred were obviously intentionally trying to end that culture, is what it was going to be. You're going to become like white people with like white religions, or you're not going to be here, kind of a thing, right? So and so
that's a lot, right? But
yeah.
Then you have to look at the fact that people do what they know.
Yeah.
And if that's all you were told, because the institutions that people trusted, Black and white, Native Americans, everyone, the church, for a lot of people, they were issuing out those decrees. There was the Negro Bible, and in it only highlighted verses like, slaves, obey your bondservants, obey your masters, this pleases the Lord. And as a slave in that space reading this, if I'm trying to please this God that you're telling me exists, I need to follow this book. So this must be right. Mm-hmm. So I now, as a mom, is seeing my child talk about, oh, I'm going to run away and go to freedom. How dare you? That's blasphemy. And then we have this dissonance that exists in this mom now scolding a child because she has bought into what she has seen. And then the same on the plantation owner side, on the slave owner side, but this is right and this is good and this is what my mom did and this is what my dad did. So if you're telling me that it's wrong, are you telling me that my mom is wrong? Are you telling me that my dad was bad? And that struggle, that internal struggle will always land on the side of family first. They aren't bad. You must be bad. And this continues to pass on like hand-me-down genes that you pass from your uncle to the nephew. Everyone gets to wear it, not realizing the trauma that hasn't been addressed. And now this trauma gets called a person's personality. Oh, that's just how he is. That's just how she talks. And then even worse, it becomes our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Our culture is built on trauma. And it's a trauma that we internalize despite what race you're in. We've all internalized it. That's why you have a lot of the I don't know if you've ever seen the doll study that was done by the Clarks, Mimi and Kenneth Clark, it was used for testimony for the board versus the Board of Education to have schools integrated in our country. But with that, they showed a black doll and a white doll, same exact doll, just the pigmentation of the skin was different. And the students that they showed, Black kids, the majority of them said they preferred the white doll. They said the bad doll, the black doll was the bad doll, was the ugly doll, was the mean doll, but the white doll was the good doll, the beautiful doll, the smart doll, because we internalize this thing and we call it culture, but it's instead trauma.
Wow. That'd be shocking. That's really shocking about the dogs. Like that, they would just, but if that's what you're taught, that's the reality of it. So, wow.
It's not even just what you're taught in your home. We have the White House, but we have the black market. We have the ugly duckling. The rest of the ducklings were white. The ugly duckling was black. When was the last time you saw in a major film or something on TV a black angel? Angels are always white. So without consciously saying it to a child, this is all you're seeing. Every instance that you're noticing, this is what goes out. They did a remake of The Little Mermaid. My daughter's name is Ariel. So when The Little Mermaid was coming out with a remake, she was all in. And then we found out they were casting a black girl as the Little Mermaid, and that blew her mind. But
so did you have to go to Hollywood for her to try out for the part, or?
She wishes, but when she found out about it, she stalked the pages to find out as much information as she could, and then she started reading the comments, and she was hurt. And I noticed her locking her computer down and walking away, and I was sitting beside her reading the comments, so I went back to talk to her, and the first thing she asked was, she is beautiful and she sings just like Ariel in the cartoons. Why do they hate her just because she was black? All these people saying Ariel is always supposed to be white. Mind you, this is a cartoon. I think we've forgotten that part. But there's so much demonization and dehumanization of this young woman because she dared to want to be Ariel the mermaid, who in the cartoons was a white mermaid.
Right.
And my daughter saw that and she had a hard time trying to grapple with this. But this is how it is.
Yes.
And unless we step up to do something, this is how it will always be. And we are so much better united than we are separated and divided. I'm excited to see more people getting comfortable being uncomfortable, but work is there to be done. A lot of work is there to be done. Yes.
And you know what? When we talk about the empathy, you were saying about empathy goes down and then the biases come in, or the biases are strong. And I totally understand that. But empathy, really, you had mentioned about curiosity, and curiosity is kind of the start of empathy, right? When you're curious about somebody, you're not judging them and you're not evaluating them because you had the microsecond glance at them and say, oh, well, they must be like this. You're curious about them. You have a conversation. Your empathy goes up. Man, that Crystal, she thinks like me. She must be a genius. No.
Well, I'll take it. But I like to look at it as three parts. So we start off being really curious. That curiosity lends itself to being empathetic. I see things through your lens. I can start to try and imagine what life is like walking in your shoes. But then it pushes me to compassion. And compassion is I am now moved to act, to do something to help your life out, to help you be better, to help to create change in the system, to create accessibility, to create inclusion, to create equity. I am moved to act to improve the state of where we find ourselves. So it always starts out by being curious, because if we don't start there, we'll just assume you chose to be there. You aren't pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. I was born in a hard life, and look at me. So why can't you do it? That's what Furious does. Curious says, what's going on? Something must be happening. There must be a reason. Let's explore what the reason is, so that we're not just cutting the weed at the top, but we're yanking that thing out from the root.
Nice. I'm on this group called the Social Housing and Equity Network Lethbridge. That's what it's called, Shenla. And 6 months ago, about 6 months ago, they were talking about privilege. And I was like a little cranky about it. Privilege. I don't have privilege. I work hard. And then after I start thinking, oh, I have privilege. Yes. It's invisible to me. I don't even recognize it, but I have privilege, right? There's things that easily I could do that somebody who is your color, or somebody, your brother, black brother, who's, would have a real challenge doing. And for me, it's just like not a question mark. I would not be fearful for my life if I got pulled over speeding, right? If I was a black man, and in some, especially in southern states, that could certainly be something that's your last time you get pulled over, right? That could happen. So
it could easily happen. So I get the what's the word I'm looking for? I get when people are defensive, because hearing white privilege can be triggering for a lot of people.
Yes.
So I think before we were talking, before we came on, I gave the example of being in a store. So you're inside of a store and you're shopping and you're enjoying yourself, but you look outside and you see people like, hey, and banging on the door. And you're looking at them like, okay, I'm in the store. Come on in. What's holding you up? There's a door right there. All you have to do is open the door, and you continue shopping. Nothing exists. You continue on your merry way shopping and walking around, but you still see them outside. And now they're putting up signs like, hey, this isn't fair. Let me in. And you're looking at the door like, I see an open sign on the door. Come on in. Walk in. You're lazy. Oh, so you want me to go over and open the door instead of you just using the handle the same way I did, right? I had to use the handle to come in, but you choose not to do it because you're lazy. And this is where the labeling comes in, without being conscious to the fact that if you're inside the store and you're seeing it open, on the other side, they must be seeing closed. Because you live in your space, you only see life through your lens. It's impossible for you to even fathom that they're seeing closed. That's privilege.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
Being able to be aware of the problem because you've never had to experience it. You've never been impacted by it. It's not saying that your life wasn't easy, because you had to open the door, come in. So you did work and you got to where you are. But just understanding that other people are willing to do the same exact thing, but their results will be completely different because they don't have the access that you have.
Definitely. And again, the curiosity comes to play, right? If there's curiosity about that as to like why, right? Yeah. Just like, where, when we talk about racial discrimination, and then there's opportunities closed that people don't even realize they're closing them. Just their practices are built such that I'm the white guy who wrote them up, and I wrote them up to look for other white guys like me, right? Because that's kind of where my frame of reference was, not being curious or not being welcoming for people who are different, and we'll have different ideas and different ways to approach problems and different solutions that may be better than mine. There's a possibility of that.
So that is one of the biggest impacts of not having a diverse team.
Yes.
When you lack diversity, you will only get from one lens. But when you mix it up, like I love it here when we do potlucks. When I was the director of a nonprofit agency for one of our counties. And whenever we did potlucks, I'm Jamaican by birth. So I would make food from where I'm from. Then my team would bring in, so I had someone from Lord knows everywhere because she lived on different army bases. I had someone from Puerto Rico. I had someone from Colombia. I had someone from Cuba. Like there is all of this different food and all the great smells just melding together. And oh my gosh, a full belly to say the least. It happens the same way in corporate America. You have different worldviews, you have different perspectives. And the idea that you could never think of will come from someone that doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you, doesn't love like you, doesn't worship like you. You miss out on that if you need to have someone coming in that fits the culture. That's the biggest myth of having an organizational culture. We need to hire people who fit the culture. Sometimes we need to hire people that will stir the pot up because that is where innovation lies.
Definitely.
Miss out on that if we close ourselves off to different and to experiencing diversity.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So, how would you engage or marshal the caring adults that are out there, to be more of value to the kiddos in their life? Like, I guess I'm kind of envisioning maybe you do a little inventory of who are the kiddos in your life. I got this nephew over here and, my, whatever. And then maybe how you could, be of value, even if it's just having a conversation, even if it's saying, hey, I missed 5 Christmases. Sorry about that. How about, I buy you something or, whatever. How do you go ahead?
I always promote people using their strengths. So I thought I was an introvert for a very long time, and I realized that was my trauma causing me to not realize how truly extroverted I am. So I will go and talk in front of hundreds of people because that's my thing, right? I like doing that. I'm alive when I'm in front of an audience. But if that is not your thing, don't you dare do it. It is exhausting to say the least. But if your thing is knitting, well, teach someone how to knit, because now that is providing this new experience, but it's also a very effective and very healthy coping strategy because you have to be mindful and intentional as you go so that you can create the beautiful tapestry that you're creating. Mm-hmm. So whatever is your gift, that's what you lead with. I'm fortunate to lead a few different initiatives in my community and in my neighboring counties as well. And in these groups that I find myself, I encourage them, what's the nearest school to your house? Especially some of the groups that I'm in, I'm the youngest by a few decades. So, people in a different season of life and they're retired and they have free time on their hands and they've gotten their COVID shots. Like, okay, so which is the nearest school? And fortunately, in one of our communities, they are creating a community school. I don't know if you have those in Alberta, but we're starting to grow this idea of a community school, which is an integrated approach to education. So you have someone from the health services available to come on site because parents might be able to get their kids to school on a school bus, but transportation to the physician is an issue. So now we're coming where you are. So health providers, law enforcement for different classes and support, therapists and mental health agencies. As a matter of fact, today's World Health Day. But all of these different players are coming into this school and bringing their resources on site so that kids and families don't have to leave and go to 4 different places to have their needs met. There is a centralized location. So that's where I push a lot of people. Hey, I know they need readers in the classroom for students to hear someone reading, but for them to also have the ability to read back to that person to get some support. You're free during the daytime. How about trying that out? I see you have a beautiful garden at your house. They're trying to do a community garden over at the school. Why not go in and lend your green thumb? Those are different opportunities where you're not having to have this fear of, but what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I mess it up? Because now you're not even talking about any of that stuff. You are going in and you are being present. You are being mindful, you're being aware, but you are being available so that that person knows someone who didn't need to come to see about me is here to see about me. Maybe I do have value. Maybe there is some good to me. We all have, so I'm a certified trainer and coach for an organization, Star Commonwealth. I'm licensed to deliver their content. And we talk about the circle of courage. If a child feels like they have a space where they belong, they are truly wanted in that space. If they have an opportunity to exercise independence and share in power, if they have the ability to master something, they have something that they're good at, and if they have the ability to give back and show their generosity, their four needs, their big overarching needs are being met, they will be resilient, they will thrive. You don't have to come in and say, hey, so I'm going to use cognitive behavioral therapy to address your need. You don't have to worry about the therapy speak. You just need to show up. You just need to show up. That's it.
Beautiful. Just show up, be there, and assist with something you know. Like as you're saying, if you're a gardener, great. If you know how to work with wood, if you can weld, if you can, whatever skill that you have, share that with a little person that you can connect with, and just that sharing that activity together gives them the opportunity to talk to somebody. It probably would just be just kind of more chit chat kind of a thing, but it's still a connection that you can have. And if it was something that was very serious that was brought up, there's other professional resources that you can rely on to say, listen, that's beyond my expertise. I want you to get the help you need. Let's talk to your mom and figure out how that might work, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Definitely. Sometimes people just want to be heard. No one wants to be fixed. We're not broken people, but sometimes we get treated as if we're both broken, so we start acting broken. No one's broken. And sometimes all you need to do is just offer a listening ear, and that's offer that listening ear, validate what you hear, and that sucks, but check you out today. And I can't wait to see what you're going to be like tomorrow. That's planting that seed for a dream. Mm-hmm. No one's asking anyone to turn into a therapist. And I think for some people, that's what keeps them frozen from wanting to help. It's that fear of, I don't know how to do that. There's no way of doing it. Do you? Yes. You are enough. If I look at it from a neurological perspective, when you have a muscle and you don't use it, you lose it. And that's how children's brains are. Their brains between 0 and 5, those are the 85% of a child's brain is formed by the age of 5. So if you don't use it, those pathways get pruned in your outer brain. So that's the prefrontal cortex, where you learn, where you problem solve, where your moral compass is. Those areas are pruned. But with the introduction of something new, a new experience, a positive experience, all of a sudden the pathways in that prefrontal cortex, they start firing again because something new is sparking creativity and thought. And that is how we start to restore the pathways of the brain that were destroyed. So we might miss out the first 5 years, but the brain isn't solidified until in the 20s. And now studies are showing that way past the 20s into adulthood, you can still cause this neuroplasticity to happen, where brain pathways are re-engineered and recreated and come back to life. That is huge when you think your small act, whether it's gardening, knitting, telling jokes, whatever, doing magic tricks, it doesn't matter. But that thing is so powerful, it will regenerate a child's brain. That's how we change trajectories. That's that's how my teacher did it for me, where now I'm working on my doctorate because of a third grade teacher that decided she wasn't going to allow my trauma to define my life. She was going to force me to grow into resilience, whether I liked it or not. And she pushed me to become the educator that will force you into resilience, whether you like it or not. But we all have that one person.
Exactly. And just think about how that one person changed the whole trajectory of your life, right? Perhaps without her intervention,
Ooh, yes.
you might not even be here, right? But
No.
you probably wouldn't have pursued other education. Maybe you wouldn't have been anywhere near the mother you are today with what you learned from your childhood. Speaking of that, you're somebody who has lived experience with childhood trauma.
Yeah.
What can you speak to your healing journey, your healing path that you have been on or probably still are on, I'm going to assume. Would that be a fair assumption?
No, I would definitely say still on.
Yeah.
But it was, I would love to say that third grade teacher just caused me to overcome all the stuff at once. So studies show if you have 6 or more ACEs, you are 500 times more likely than a woman with no ACEs for domestic violence. You're 11 times more likely to have IV drug use. You're 3 times more likely to struggle with lung disease, 6 times more likely to have a mental health diagnosis. These things are real. You lose 20 years off your life expectancy. So in the teenage, early 20s, it was kind of messy there for a minute. Because no one taught me how to cope. My third grade teacher taught me how to dream and to walk into that. So I was still doing it. I left high school at 15. I was in college at 16. I graduated at 20. I was making positive steps, but because I didn't know what coping was, my coping strategies were very unhealthy, but they were super effective. And I think we discount drugs and alcohol, porn, gambling, whatever you choose as not coping. It is coping to a person who doesn't know anything else. It's not healthy.
Right.
And when we start teaching healthy coping strategies, that's where the shift comes. And I know someone had mentioned mindfulness to me. And I'm going to be honest and transparent. When I heard it, the first thing that came to mind was, Black people don't do this. I'm not going to do this. But she recommended.
That's for white couples in California or something.
I didn't grow up in a community where I saw people doing yoga. I saw it on TV and they didn't look like me. So I just assumed this one for me. But I ended up trying it. I went to a yoga studio and I was like, okay, I feel a little less stressed. So let me really invest. And I had the opportunity to go over to Atlanta in Georgia, and they had a 3-day retreat specifically for Black women to engage and to dive into mindfulness. And I swear I experienced every emotion on this earth in those 3 days. And that is when I realized I get triggered because I haven't healed. And that brought me into this space of, we are going to knock on all these doors and we are going to face and sit in the feelings and the emotion of all of these things. Mind you, I had a therapist. I am a therapist with a therapist. I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, but I also got my therapist on speed dial. But I did that, and I purposely leaned into all of those doors and all of those skeletons until healing started to take place. So first it was...
How did you know that, Crystal? How did you know the healing was starting to take place?
I realized I was getting healed when things that would normally trigger me all of a sudden didn't trigger me anymore.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
So
you said the triggers, knowing the triggers meant that the healing hadn't occurred yet, right? Or knowing that you could be triggered. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
There has to be a key in the ignition for the car to start. So if nothing is there, then something's dead. And when those triggers would come and nothing, I had no response, and not even that I didn't even have a response, I wasn't interested in retaliation or retribution. I was interested in, you must be going through something for you to come to me with this. How can I support you? When I saw that happening, poof, this thing has no more power, has no more control. Is all of it gone? No. I don't think that's going to happen until death. But in the meantime, I am steady on this journey of everything that comes in that poses conflict. Instead of avoiding it, instead of trying to overpower and dominate it, I lean into it because there is something there that hasn't been healed that I need to address, and I need to face that scary thing. But the beautiful thing that I've realized on this journey to healing, I thought the thing that I was afraid of was this big scary monster, without even realizing what I was seeing was the shadow. Our shadows always cast way bigger than the real image. But sometimes we get so lost in the magnitude of the shadow that it causes us to put that thing away and not face it because we're terrified of the impact that it will have. But when I started knocking on those doors, I realized when it started walking towards me, the shadow started shrinking and I saw the real image. I saw a lion, but it was a kitty cat that was walking towards me. That's what happens when we step into conflict. We lean into it, we heal, and we recover. That's how we truly establish this sense of resilience where we can face anything.
Nice. And you had just mentioned, and I just want to, for our audience, talk about, you're a counselor, you're a therapist, and you go to a counselor, you go to a therapist. And so if use the mental health resources that are available to you, man, even if you think, life is pretty good, great, use it as a personal growth thing. You might find, as Crystal did, well, Crystal was aware of them, but you might find things in your life that are self-limiting beliefs that you have, that you address them. And part of that, I have a small T trauma thing in my life that I just discovered like 6 months ago, kind of a thing that happened when I was like 5 years old. And it was a comment my mother made. And by the way, I'm not mom blaming, because she was, moms do amazing things. I'm here because a woman decided that she was going to let me grow in her body for 9 months. And then after I came out, feed me from her body and look after me and make sure that I got to school and I had shots and all the things that mothers do. Amazing, amazing. So I'm not mom blaming. But one thing that this belief had, that now in retrospect, I say, oh my goodness, that was a belief that kept me at a level that I was not enough, that somehow I was deficient. And then once I realized that, just like, yeah, and I am enough. So I can dispense with that decision that I made when I was 5 years old. Like, when you're 5 years old, do you think you're going to make the best call when you think that you're responsible for everything bad that happens in your world? Of course not. So you go back and revisit that. And 5-year-old Alan, certainly there was nothing wrong with him then, nothing wrong with him today. He's enough. And so, move on, kind of a thing. And life gets a lot freer and easier when you accept that you are enough. Because we're all enough, aren't we, Crystal?
We are. I actually have a ring on and it says I am enough on my ring. It's that constant reminder that perfection is something that will never happen. So I celebrate every progress, but good, bad, and different, it doesn't matter. In this moment, I am enough and I have everything that I need to have, and I'm everything that I need to be in this moment. And that is enough.
If we were in person, I bump my fist against your rig and generate that power. So, but yes, we are enough. And that's whatever belief and experience you had from your childhood might have left with you a residual that you are not enough. So doing the work of addressing those, it's going to be painful. You're going to cry. There's going to be things that make you hurt. But doing that work, I think, is very valuable in terms of moving forward with the best possible life that you have. Make the best rest of your life the best of your life, and carry on bravely.
Definitely. I notice every time there is a woman going into labor, no one ever says, I'm sorry, my sympathies.
Yes.
We know it's going to be this ridiculous. My labors were 7 hours, 17 hours, 19 hours.
Woo!
having kids. That's why my fourth is a puppy. But
you didn't like that trend. What's that going to be? Yeah. So.
But despite the pain associated with labor, we do it. And women all over the world continue to do it because we forget every ounce of pain when we hear or see that baby coming out.
Yeah.
Not because it's hard. It's hard, but we do it courageously anyway.
Yeah. You know what I learned that really shocked me is that women in their last, I think it was the last trimester of their pregnancy, their brains actually shrink. And then when they have the baby, it like rewires into mummy brain and like grows again, right? That's bizarre, right? I mean, just like women as a human baby makers, like that they can create people inside them. That's amazing. But that, their body changes so much and their actual brain changes size, it blows me away. So
that's our superpower, man.
It is. And I bow to your superpower. That's you and your sisters. That's pretty amazing. So, hey, Crystal, we're at an hour here. We've been having fun here chatting away, and I kind of lost track of time. Any things you want to close with or that you have to comment before we wrap her up here?
I will say one thing, and I'll go back to the point on therapy. I don't think therapy is for everyone, but therapy is a great resource. And this is why when we buy our cars at 3,000 miles, we know we need to take it in for an oil change. We know we need to get it serviced. And if we don't, that beautiful machine that we just invested all of this time and money on, it will crap out on us. It will go broke and we'll have to replace it. But we can't just go to the store and buy mental health. We talk so much about mental illness, but we never look at the fact that mental health is something that has to be maintained, has to be serviced the same way we service everything else. And today is World Health Day, like I mentioned, and we take care of our physical health, but we don't really spend as much time taking care of our mental health because for some reason, we don't see our mental health as that big of a deal. Oh, I get sad from time to time. Who doesn't? I'm stressed. I'm burnt out. All these things are happening, but those are normal. Again, I think this trauma that we have mislabeled as culture has taught us that we are supposed to struggle and struggle is normal. We're supposed to work and work and work and work and not have respite, not have self-care and quality self-care. So the same way you take care of everything that you invest your time and your money to attain is the same way you want to value and prioritize your mental health. So whether you do it from a spiritual space, from a holistic space, from speaking to a therapist, however you choose to do it, but prioritize your mental health, because if the mind isn't right, then everything else falls offline. And that's what we forget. If the computer for your organization goes down, if the network crashes, work cease. The other day when Google blocked out, we all lost our minds. How do we send our emails? How do we find out the answers to life's hardest questions when I can't say, hey, Google? The same thing happens with our mental health and in protecting our mind space. If that doesn't work, then we see the physiological issues, the high blood pressure, the hypertension, the strokes, the cancers, the COPDs, because when we're stressed, we don't breathe the same way we would normally breathe. So as you prioritize everything else and everyone else, prioritize your mental health, because if not, just like that organization, work stops, work cease.
Well said. Well said. I'm 100% with you. Man, look after yourself, right? Look after yourself so you have the best health possible. Look after yourself so that you can make the difference you want to make in this world. Look after yourself so you can be there for the people that are important in your life. Look after yourself so that you can enjoy the things that are meaningful to you in your life. So keep well, be a champion for children. It's easy. You can make a big difference. See ya.